By the way, I am recording this just so that everybody knows we're going to record the session today. And here comes Dr. Brunner. Dr. Brunner,
Hey.
hey, how you doing? Look at you. Out in space today. I feel like that's where my head is. All right. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. I think it's time we get going. And first of all, it's really good to see everyone looking healthy and well. And thank goodness that we live in the age that we do, where we actually can do something as important as this via this means, that we don't have to postpone it at all. So thank you for being on Mark's committee. I personally appreciate it. I know that Mark does as well. Just to remind you all once again that we're recording the session for everyone except for the committee. If you can keep your video and audio muted for right now, and I'll be able to bring you back up once we have questions and answers from the participants, okay? So I just wanted to welcome everybody today. Mark has been with us since 2015. We are at the culminating event in his work here at Temple in the Ph.D. program. He's going to have a good presentation for us this morning in an area that he is very, very passionate about. Before we get going, however, what I'd like to do is to ask the committee to please elect a chair for the defense. I am advisory chair for Mark for his dissertation, but I can't sit as the chair for the examining committee. So I'm going to put it out to the folks on the committee. If you can please, among yourselves, elect a chair.
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to watch someone else do it. So.
I second Allison.
And I got a thumbs up from Dr. Cornett. Okay, Dr. Reynolds, would you like to take over at this point?
Sure. Welcome to the guests, and congratulations, Mark, for making this milestone.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Confredo explained the usual platform is that you have about 20 minutes to present, and in this format, it's a little bit harder to signal that your time's up. But I assume you're watching the clock as well, but we'll give you a heads up if you start to run over 20 minutes. And then we have a number of committee members who we will be able to give about 20 to 25 minutes each for questioning. Sometimes the questions come from one committee member at a time, and other times that it turns into more of a conversation. So either is fine. And I just would like to clarify for the guests that Dr. Confredo is the advisor, and then we have committee members, and I would like to also know for myself which of the committee members is the outside reader.
I think that's me. I believe that's me.
That's
okay.
correct.
So that helps. So after the committee members and the outside reader have chances to ask questions, then we invite our guests to ask questions if there's time. Just toward the end, maybe with 15 minutes or so left with the 2-hour time block, we'll invite Mark and guests to leave the meeting, or maybe we'll put you in a breakout room and we'll deliberate, and we'll invite Mark back for the results, followed by the rest of you if you'd like to join us again to hear the results. So without further ado, Mark, it's our pleasure to hear your presentation this morning.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen here. And bear with me for 1 second, just need to get in here. Okay, are you all able to see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I want to just preface one thing that Google Slides has been getting a little glitchy, and I may have to start and stop. Hopefully that won't be an issue, but just wanted to put that out there. So the title is Criteria, Composition, and Compliance, Concert Band Directors' Perception of Concert Band Publisher Grading Systems. And the first thing I would like to do is to thank all of you for being on the committee. Dr. Confredo for providing me with this opportunity to earn the degree and a mentoring process throughout. Dr. Reynolds for stepping in at the last minute, providing your insight, experience, and meticulous attention to detail. Dr. Brunner for your support and assistance in working with me during my independent study and your vast experience and knowledge in this topic. And Dr. Cornett for your expertise in wind band literature conducting and your knowledge of scholastic concert band repertoire. So thank you all very much for your help here. I'd like to start off first with a quote from Hilary Apperstadt from The Ohio State University. And the selection of repertoire is the single most important task that music educators face before entering the classroom or rehearsal room. Through the repertoire we choose, we not only teach curricular content to our students, but we also convey our philosophy in terms of what we believe students need to learn to achieve musical growth. Choosing repertoire requires balancing composition difficulty with student skills. As Kurt Seville stated in his dissertation from 1991, where he developed an actual computer program that would evaluate these types of ideas. Directors must consider both their own and their students' perceptions of musical pieces' difficulty level. And determining a composition's difficulty level requires careful consideration of all the compositional elements, as Dr. Confredo stated in her 1996 journal article. So the statement of the problem, there is no standard difficulty scale. A substantial amount of musical material is acquired through music publishers, but there's no standard difficulty scale among publishers for content band music difficulty stratification. Specifically, Wareheim, in his 1967 dissertation, looked at 3 state band lists, the New York list, the National Band Association list, and the Virginia list, and found that between 800 titles, only 9% agreed on actual grade level that's the same. So each state was changing what the grade level might be as opposed to what the publisher gave. Additionally, grade appropriate repertoire selection is an essential responsibility of concert band directors who must rely on the personal interpretation of various amounts of differing grading systems. And directors' understanding of difficulty often shrouds the important programming and curricular decisions that can lead to discouragement and ultimately impaired musical development for students. Publisher inconsistencies within their list and even within the state list challenges band directors to identify level appropriate material. And current research is scant and has not focused on the selection criteria for difficulty level appropriate music or how those criteria differ from level to level. So the first research question that I asked was, does a discrepancy exist between performance difficulty levels assigned through publishers' grading systems and concert band directors and music administrators' perceptions of this music difficulty level? Now, the title is concert band directors, but I included music administrators because often administrators, music supervisors, or were band directors at one point that perhaps moved up to that level, but they are still very much vested in the interest of literature choices that reflect curriculum. And the second question is, what criteria do instrumental music educators use to select level appropriate music for their ensembles that is in an appropriate performance difficulty level? The current study aimed to verify the existence of this discrepancy between the assessment of music publishers and music educators, analyze the magnitude of these discrepancies, and identify potential causes of these discrepancies. And it was my hope that this threefold approach would help publishers and educators to better understand and resolve the issues that lead to these discrepancies. The theoretical framework that I based this upon was flow theory by Csikszentmihalyi. That's the optimal psychological state that people experience when they're engaged in an activity that's appropriately challenging to one's skill level. It's commonly referred to as being in the zone. So if a student is in a band class and the music's too easy, or if a student is in a band class and the music's too hard, they're not going to want to be in that zone. So that's a very important topic to be able to keep in mind for these things. Additionally, Vygotsky's zone of proximal development is the gap between what a learner cannot do, even if guided or when collaborating with others, and what they can do independently. This is, of course, the optimal area where we want students to be. And instructional scaffolding, or also known as Vygotsky scaffolding, is a useful component to flow theory because it demonstrates the music teacher's role in generating flow states. This is, of course, because ZPD's social constructs establishes a framework for students to achieve a flow state through outside guidance. So getting to the literature, dealing with ability-appropriate pedagogy and effective student learning. The selection of appropriate instructional materials and methods strongly affects learning processes and stimulates students to progress to higher levels of learning. And then conversely, poorly chosen instruction materials and inadequate resources can lead to poor student performance and ultimately a bad experience for the students. Of course, relating this to ZPD, proper learning materials are necessary to scaffold learners meaningfully. And educators must also align their music selections with academic achievement goals and use selections effectively within the classroom. And Google just froze. Let me see if I can get this here. Ah, there we go. Okay, apologize about that. So, the importance of repertoire and music pedagogy. The teacher's repertoire choices can communicate their philosophical and aesthetic values to students and their parents. Specific compositions are worth considering due to their degree of serious artistic merit, acceptance, and skill. And this goes back to Osling's seminal dissertation in 1978 from the University of Maryland, where he talked about what defines quality literature. And Towner and Gilbert and many others since have done replicated a similar study, but at no point did any of them talk about difficulty level. And then, of course, repertoire selection is about defining a curriculum for students, overall music education, and effective music education experiences depend on the quality of music materials used to facilitate instruction. Now, with concert band literature grading systems, Haig in 1986 in the in the National Band Association Guide wrote a piece that talked about what publishers use and some of these issues. The first is curriculum-based grading. And that means that the music correlates to a method book. So when composers are rating music, that's how that works. The next would be criterion-based, which is when composers write to predefined parameters such as range, rhythm, key, tempo. And the third came after Haig's article in 1986, and it's standards-based. It's related to the 1994 Standards for Music Education. And as an example, there's many method books. Dr. Confredo's book that she co-authored from 2010, Measure of Success, is an example of one of these standards-based grading. There's also global concert band grading systems. And Seville and Wareheim in their dissertations talked about these and the fact that they're fraught with subjective judgments. For instance, if we take a look here at this band music guide from the instrumentalist in 1996, you can see there's 6 levels, but there isn't a whole lot of information that determines what is a grade 1, what's a grade 2, a grade 3, and so on. So I took this a little bit farther, and I looked at 3 prominent music publishers, Bellwin Company, FGH Music, and Hal Leonard. And I also looked at J.W. Pepper, based out of Pennsylvania, the world's largest music retailer. And just as an example, to look at their grading systems. So Bellwin has 5 difficulty levels, ranging from 1/2 to 4+. FGH has 6 levels, a little bit different using decimal points. But you'll notice when they get to grade 4 and 5, they're not half levels. Hal Leonard has 6 levels, but essentially it's really 5 because the 6th level is professional. And then J.W. Pepper uses 7 levels with letters defining as beginner, very easy, easy, medium easy, and so on. So you can see between these 4 examples that there is already a discrepancy, and then magnify that by all of the publishers and retailers. And there can be a lot of confusion. So the methodology I used was I had a quantitative research design. The recruitment took place over a 3-month period from September to December of 2019. And I used US elementary to college band directors, and I got a fairly large representation of 171 people. I used a Google Forms for data collection. The instrumentation had 3 sections to a survey. The first part collected demographic information. The second part used Likert scale and checkbox responses to gauge the participants' perceptions of repertoire selection methodology. And the third, the participants viewed a random sampling of 10 excerpts and assigned them to a difficulty level from easiest to grade 6, the most difficult. Regarding data analysis, the participants' responses were compared to the publisher ratings and standard deviations of participants' responses to determine discrepancy magnitude. Responses to open-ended questions were analyzed for categorical similarities, coded and analyzed. So this is the part that I really like to talk about, the results. In terms of demographics, I had a very experienced group here. 70% had 11 or more years experience. 65% earned a master's degree. 52% were high school band directors, where 46% were middle school directors. And I think the reason why that was that way is because when you're in elementary school, you know that you're going to be playing fairly easy music. When you're in college, you're going to be playing much difficult music. But it's the middle school and high school where assessment really matters, and they're looking at different levels. Additionally, the number of responses was 210, and that's because I allowed in the responses if you taught multiple levels. For instance, if you were a middle school director who also taught high school and vice versa, that's why. So that in itself shows that there, out of 171 responses, 210 have multiple jobs. I asked the question, does your state have a prescribed music list that you look for? 79% said it did, 11% said no, and 10% said they don't know. Out of these participants, 20% were trumpet players, 17% percussion, and then the rest, were filling all that we're in. And 50% taught in Maryland, 19% in Pennsylvania, 9% in Virginia. And this stands to reason. I live in Maryland. I've been teaching in Maryland. I have a lot of colleagues. And I do also do some things in the Mid-Atlantic region. This will become a little bit more important when I talk later about some limitations of the study and representation of a national sample. On this slide here, the first table are the 10 pieces that the participants looked at. And you may know some of them. It's hopeful that we may not know some of them, but that wasn't as important because table 2 shows the results of just the excerpts. And I'm going to show you what the excerpt looked like in a few minutes here. But let's take a look at number 1, which was Larry Clark's Conviction. It was rated by the publisher as a grade 1. The mode, a grade 2, but the mean of what the director stated was that it was a 1.76. And out of these 10 excerpts, what I found was directors rated every piece harder than what the publisher's grade level was, except one piece, which was John Corigliano's Circus Maximus. They rated it at a 5.76, and it's much harder than that. But I believe the reason why is because they only saw a 4-page excerpt. And had they known that it was a 45-minute piece, had they known that there were a lot of intricacies, the instrumentation, they probably would have rated it higher. And I know this was probably hard to see, but this was an example of what the grade 1 piece looked like. I stripped all identification on there, so you only were able to look at it. But what I asked them to do was to look at this and to be able to see what makes your decision. What are the factors that do that? On this piece, 76.7% stated that rhythmic complexity was the reason why they stated that it was a 1.76 mean. Then tessitura, part independence, and you can see how that's there. Consistently for all of these pieces, all 10 pieces, the top 4 issues were rhythmic complexity, tessitura, part independence, and wind instrumentation. I asked a specific question about tessitura. It was a Likert scale question to find out what instruments directors thought were most important. Do you consider instrument range as an important criterion when selecting appropriate repertoire? 98% said they did, and 50% said they stated that trumpet was important, 28% clarinet and French horn, and all the way down to percussion, that's not important, which I put in there just to see what they would say. Then rhythmic complexity, they said was very important. Part independence was important. And wind and percussion instrumentation was very important. Now, I do need to be transparent here and say one thing that I made a mistake on. In my discussion, I did not include wind and percussion instrumentation. I got a little confused. I looked at the wrong tables, and in my mind, I was thinking that wind and percussion instrumentation is really part independence. But I need to go back, and when I do a revision, I need to put a sentence or two in there supporting that this is important. And also Milliken wrote a piece called Extending the Discussion, Making the Grade What Makes a Piece Difficult for Less Experienced Ensembles. And he talks about wind and percussion instrumentation. Specifically that you might have one clarinet part versus 3, or how many percussionists you have. So I will take care of that. There we go. So getting here. So to answer to the first question, is there a discrepancy? Yes, there is a discrepancy. And this is supported by that there's a lack of standardization amongst the rating systems, as noted by Seville and Wareheim in their dissertations. And this has been previously documented. Wesolowski actually talked about it in inter-rater reliability and how adjudicators have difficulty telling what difficulty level is. So if adjudicators are having the issue, if band directors are having the issue, and ultimately students are having the issue, then there is a discrepancy. Second research question asked, what were the criteria? And in alphabetical order, part independence, rhythmic complexity, tessitura, and wind and percussion instrumentation. Additionally, cross-cueing was one of the questions, and that received the most varied opinions for whether it's important or not. And composition length, everyone said that composition length is not a factor in deciding the difficulty level of music, which I found that surprising. So to have a discussion here, the current music grading systems, there's a lack of discriminating repertoire for selection method and global methods. There is a profusion of music that happens every year. Kirchhoff states that there's over 1,000 pieces that come out every year, which is just a lot to have to understand. And then there's a need for an objective band grading system to be able to match the strengths and the weaknesses of ensembles. What are the implications for music educators? We have found that publisher rating systems are not the most effective resource to select literature. There needs to be an industry-wide standard that goes with this, and the inclusion of level-appropriate repertoire needs to also, that selection process needs to be included in undergrad curricula, so students, when they come out, have an understanding. Novice students seem to be the ones that had the most issues with this, but we still all have issues. And then when you're in your lesson planning, you need to be able to include these top 4 elements when you're planning your literature and you're planning your lessons. Some limitations, and I mentioned this. I did not include state list difficulty assessment data. The use of a national sample, I had 26 states respond, but I could not pinpoint any state or region-specific trends in difficulty. The study only used whole levels. I did that on purpose, but many publishers use half levels. So that could be something to think about. And there were 2 questions. My perceptions of grade level ratings is mostly the same as publishers, and my perceptions is mostly different from publishers. Most said that they were different, but it was very close. But that was perhaps a limitation by the way that that was used. And I only used 10 excerpts. Some suggestions is use full band compositions, expand the number of total publishers, use the state list, include string players, string directors, and how that would work. Increase the number of participants, add more open-ended questions, discuss the socioeconomic differences, and match student abilities to improve learning outcomes, and determine why these discrepancies exist. So in conclusion, there is a discrepancy between concert band publisher difficulty grading systems and the band director's perceptions. There are inconsistencies between publisher, national, state, and regional graded music list. Part independence, rhythmic complexity, tessitura, and wind and percussion instrumentation are the music educator's main criteria in selecting level appropriate repertoire. More novice teacher resources are needed. And finally, more investigation is necessary to understand the rationale for the importance of music selection criteria. So thank you for listening for all of this. And I think we move on to the next session here, next part of the session here. Dr. Confredo, should I stop sharing my screen?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Mark. Do I have a volunteer to be the first person to ask questions from the committee?
I can go ahead.
Thank you, Matt.
Sure.
Hi, Dr. Brenner. Hope you're doing well.
Hi, Mark. You too. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for, especially under the circumstances, coming in on this. I'm really glad that you did this, because this is probably, especially when I was teaching high school and junior high, probably the thing that I pined over the most was the choosing repertoire. Even now, really, choosing repertoire and the difficulty level and how everything was done. And so I thought all the work that you did was really interesting, especially the findings of how people perceived the different pieces. I thought that was really great. I wanted to ask a couple questions. Just one of the things I guess the questions that you asked the participants, when you asked them about the criterion, you included, everything, length, tempo, all of that stuff. But then tessitura was a completely different question and not included in that. What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, great question, because I pined over that for a while. I think we all know that there are perceptions of directors. For instance, you being a trumpet player, myself being a percussionist, I think we probably look at those first. So I wanted to also see if people did that, and also what were the instruments. For me, when I look at literature, I always look at the trumpet part. Does it go up to a G above the staff? Like, where are we in there? That's what I find that I do, and that's what most people ended up doing. So I wanted to be able to break that out also within the survey, that we could get an actual listing of each individual importance of instruments. So that's why I did that.
Okay. Yeah, that was good. That was good. And I honestly, I thought it was kind of funny, because when I was teaching middle school and high school, that was exactly the very first thing that I did. When I went to a music store and was looking through scores, the first thing I did was go through and look at what the trumpet range was. And then it was like the grade level, because I think in my feeling, it was like range is such a developmental thing. It was like everything else I felt like I could teach. I could teach them the rhythms. I could, we work on tone throughout, whatever. But range was something that needed time. So so that was good there. The other question I have is I don't know if I want to jump to this, because it's a little bit more of an ending question.
I think
I'm wondering if I can. I'm wondering if I can.
Sure, go ahead.
Hop in with kind of a follow-up that's sort of in the same vein as what you just asked. So again, Mark, I just want to echo the great work all around. This is a really interesting topic, and I think you've been very thorough, and it was really enjoyable to read. My question is a little bit tied into what Dr. Brunner just asked. I noticed that one of the pieces of information that you collected from the participants was what their primary instrument is. And I'm wondering, what was your intent in collecting that particular piece of information? Were you thinking that there may be some bias? Like, for example, trumpet players might be more inclined to look at trumpet ranges, or percussionists might be more inclined to look at the demands of the percussion parts in terms of instruments. Can you just kind of flesh out what was your intent in that particular question, in collecting that particular information?
Yes, that's exactly, I wanted to see if there was a bias. I did not notice any. It seems that everyone looks at the trumpet parts first, or the majority of people look at the trumpet parts. But there was no, I'm a clarinet player. I'm going to look at clarinet because that's the most important part. I thought there might be. I did not find any correlation or any trend with that.
That's really interesting. One suggestion I might have is to maybe include something about that in your conclusions, or just a couple sentences at the end, because you did go through the trouble of collecting that info, and you're saying that you found no particular bias. So it might be just interesting to mention that.
That's great. Now that you're saying, and that's the thing I hope that happens here, is that we don't cover a lot of topics, we uncover a lot of topics. And that's actually one I didn't even, perspective-wise, I didn't even think about, because I was just looking at the raw quantitative data. Okay, well, it's trumpet players. That's what we looked for. So that's great. Thank you.
Matt.
Oh,
Back to
okay.
you.
That's fine. The let's see. Sorry, if anybody else wants to jump in, I'm still looking for where the next one was.
I can ask another one, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I was wondering, Mark, if you could give us a little bit more detail on the methodology that you used to choose these particular 10 pieces. You mentioned a couple times in the paper that it was random, but I'm wondering specifically, I mean, did you open the catalog and just close your eyes and point? I mean, how did you come to these 10 pieces? And specifically, I'm curious about Circus Maximus, but we can circle back to that.
Absolutely. So this is a great question, because I thought long and hard about how to do this. The two main lists that are used for state assessments throughout the country is the National Band Association list and the Texas PML list, Prescribed Music List. So I took those two lists and I listed every single piece of music that was in there with their publisher. I then went on to the publisher websites and I looked to see who listed publicly the criteria for grade level rating within them. And it only was a handful of publishers that did that. So then I deleted all of the other pieces that did not have publisher, ratings or anything like that. I listed all of those in there. Then I combined the two lists together, and still the coding, which was from which list. For each grade level, so I did for grade 1, I put all of those pieces in a randomizing software. From there, it just popped out 3 or 4 pieces. I did 5 per level is what I did. So then I got 5, so 1 through 6. And then I did that again to come up with 10 randomly. So that's why I just let the computer go and do that, and it just picked, I believe it was 2 1s, a couple 2s. Circus Maximus was not my first choice. And the reason why, everything else I was able to get the sheet music for. I was able to either get it as a PDF from the publishers or things like that. I could not get some of the grade 6 literature, or I would have to spend hundreds of dollars, or it would have to be a rental, or I didn't get permission to do it. I was able to get that from Corigliano, or actually it's Carl Fisher from their website. And I published with Carl Fisher, so I kind of called in a little bit of a favor for this. And I was able to get permission to do that and to use that piece. A lot of people did not recognize it. And what was really interesting is the first 4 pages does not have a lot of demand in it. There's not a lot of density. So I think that's why, had I gone and done another section of the music, I think perhaps they would have seen that, like, the ending, or where the gunshot is, or something like that. But what I did was I stayed consistent and used the first 3 to 4 pages of each piece, removing titles, composers, publishers, and all of that. So that's how that ended up happening. And I did think it was interesting that people, I mean, knowing that piece, how difficult it is, and people rated it a 5.76, that's the same as Symphonic Dance No. 3 or Incantation and Dance, which they are not on the same playing field. So that's why I brought in the fact about composition length. That would have been a big factor, but unanimously, everyone said composition length is not a factor when they're selecting grade level appropriate material.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is sort of a shame that you weren't able to get a more I could use the word traditional grade 6 piece. And it's fascinating that that piece came in under what I don't even think of that piece as a grade 6. I think of it as something beyond that, whatever.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many extended techniques. It's 45 minutes long. There's a gunshot. There's a marching band that goes through. I mean, just forces alone, there's like a handful of groups in the country that could do that piece, you know? So it would be interesting to see maybe in a future study if you could somehow get a more traditional looking grade 6 piece, if that would be a little bit more in alignment. I just felt like the Circus Maximus, it's a great piece, of course, but it was just so far out there in terms of difficulty that I was like, why that of all grade 6 pieces? But the copyright issues or publisher issues, that certainly makes sense.
Yeah, and I after putting it in there, I was actually surprised. I thought maybe this is actually a really good anomaly to say that this is such an over the top piece, and everybody said, "Oh, it's a grade 5.5."
Mm-hmm.
Which is
did people? I don't what the excerpt that was chosen. You said that just came from the publisher. They just gave that to you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Just kind of at random, or that was something they had.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Like you just did you just say to them, could I get scans of this section of the piece, or did they just say, here's the only section we can give you?
No, I said I want to use the first 4 pages.
Okay.
So they actually gave me the entire score, but I just did it, and then I went into with using Adobe, just edited the PDF, and I took all identifying materials off of it.
Okay.
That's actually a really interesting point that both of you are bringing up, because as you know, as we all know, music that is more difficult, for lack of a better word, is also has the ability, right, that music for younger bands does not enjoy, and that is the amount of time, which goes back to duration, to develop ideas, right? And so where you're taking the first 4 pages in any one given tune, so it's like in a grade 1 piece, those ideas they're out there and they're done, right? In a grade 6, it might be like a little tiny glimpse of everything that is yet to come. So I would echo Dr. Cornett's, maybe next time, and I, obviously understand why you selected what you did, but it would be interesting to look at that, and maybe even to take the same process and look at some tunes that are more compressed. So in other words, rather than 1 through 6, like 4 through 6, to see how much more discriminating your listeners and your viewers can be. But that issue of development has everything to do with the ideas of duration, which of course has to do with whether or not somebody can play it for that period of time, whether or not they have the technical chops. So that's a great point that you bring up, Trish.
Another issue is that to do the study that I had, to do it properly, took 20 to 30 minutes. And I was very concerned about putting any more bandwidth in there for them to look at, because people probably started tuning out. And when I had, so there was a question after each grade level: why did you rate it this way? And it was interesting to see some people, said, I don't know, it's too hard. You had to answer. So they, gibberish that they put in. And then there were other people that wrote paragraphs. This is why I did it. So, that's a testament to reliability, rater reliability and how they want to perceive the survey itself.
Another question I had, just in one of your tables or something, and you mentioned like Belwin had, I think they had 4 or 5.
They had 5.
Something like that.
5 levels that were started at 0.5. So in 0.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Did they go into halves too?
So Belwin and FJH go into halves. Hal Leonard did not.
Okay. And so you're not counting the halves as a separate level from between 3 and 3.5. Those aren't separate levels.
For this study, I did not, because I wanted to force people to have to say this is a grade 1, a grade 2, or grade 3. It's my opinion that these half levels confuse. You didn't just make it more confusing, because there's plenty of times when it's a 3 or a 3.5 and there isn't much difference. And there's really no criteria. When you look at, I'll use FJH as an example. The composer criteria, the criterion-based criteria that goes with it, there's no difference between 3 and 3.5. It's the same. So the publishers are providing that information. And let me back up for 1 second. I'm approaching this study I approached as a researcher and as a music educator, but I also have a different hat that I'm a composer. So I've seen it from the inside, and I did not talk about that at all from a biased standpoint, but I can bring it up here that I have seen what they give the composers to compose with, and I can tell you there's no difference between some of these levels. You know, it's an arbitrary, and I think also it's where it fits in their catalog. If they have a 3.5 already and they need really a 3, they can do that. And I can speak to that. I wrote a piece in January that they told me it's probably a little too hard for grade 2, but if you make it a little easier, we'll make it grade 1. And I really didn't change a whole lot that was in there. I just made it a little bit shorter and, you know, truncated a few things. But, you know, and I didn't, like I said, I did not bring this up because this is a whole different perspective and a whole different study.
Yeah, because my question was then going to be, so if you count the halves as different levels, does that mean that a grade 4 in Bellwin, that gives them like 8 levels or something like that, going from half to 1 to 1.5? And so does that then kind of equal or come closer to the 7, the 7
The
grade
J.W. Pepper
scale or something? Yeah, something like that. So that was
and I have tried to, and I have spoken to J.W. Pepper, and Wenger Jones is now owned by J.W. Pepper. I've spoken to them to say, all right, is this a grade 3? Because it's listed as medium easy. And I usually can't get a definitive answer on that. There's a range of grade, and I think really grade 3, that 2-3 area really is where there's a range where it goes from easy to medium to medium.
Yeah. And I think, you know, Trish could probably say exactly the same thing whenever we're looking at pieces. And well, there's always something that you'll see and it's like, no, that's not a grade 3. That's harder, or
it's a hard grade 3 versus an easy grade 3.
Right. Yeah.
Or another thing that you actually did bring up in your paper is that there are things that make it a technical grade 4, but it's a musical grade 6. And that's something that I think a lot of young teachers can't always differentiate. They see some whole notes and they think, oh, this is going to be easy, but it's incredibly difficult. So that's something that I think takes a little bit more experience, but we all struggle with that. And then there are other pieces that are 3.5 minutes of the piece is a grade 3. And then there's like 30 seconds of it that's a grade 6. And what do you do with that? You know, so.
Dr. Confredo had turned me on to that because it's Doug Akey, who's in Arizona, and he worked with the Arizona Band Directors Association to put that in their state list. So if you look on their website, it actually says, you know, whatever piece of music, it'll say grade 3 technical, grade 4 musical, which is really a really great way to do it. I reached out to him through phone, through email, through Arizona Band Directors, and I never was able to get a hold of him because I really wanted to pick his brain and talk to it. But that's about as far as I got with it.
Mark, I'm going back to, I'm glad you brought up Doug's system because I think it's great. I'm going back to the 0.5, 3.5, 4.5, and just thinking about how publishers operate. Do you suppose that they use that in the very same sense as what Dr. Cornett was just saying? So, you've got 3 minutes of grade 3, but just for this section right here, it just, really taxes you for 30 seconds and you go back. Do you suppose those those half scores are meant to like be a red flag or just say, hey, to a potential buyer, music educator saying, you got to take a closer look at this. Do you think that that's what's meant by that? Were you able to get that information or glean that from your experience or from your discussions with folks at the publishing companies?
Well, first, I would not have gotten any of that information from the study simply because I did straight levels. But based on my experience, yes, it's something in there that's making it harder. It's usually never a musical element, because the musical element, I think, is longitudinal. It's over the whole piece. It's just not 10 seconds that all of a sudden this is a musical section. So it's usually a technical aspect, probably musical density or tempo or rhythm is what's going to push that over to do that. I will tell a completely anecdotal story that I had a piece of music that I submitted to a publisher, and they said, we want to do this, but this piece of music is too long. And I said, oh, well, it's within the time frame that you want it to be. They said, no, it's too many measures. It's kind of like the Mozart quote, with Salieri, too many notes. But what they were looking at, and this shows you the marketing side, was the piece had about 25 more measures that would go onto a fourth page.
Right.
And in grade 3 music, they only want 3 pages of music because it would cost more money to print, more money, just everything would cause issues. So I had to cut out 20 to 30 measures throughout the piece so it would fit on 3 pages of music. And I thought the piece was a grade 4, so the compromise was I cut out 20 measures, it was a 3.5. So
right. Yeah, we went through the same thing with the method book too. With both method books and now the theory book, they go by increments of 4, and they give us, it needs to fit into 48 pages or 52 pages. It's got to be something that fits within increments of 4. So yeah, there's no magic to it when you're looking at the business side. You're right. Sorry, Matt, it's still your turn, I think.
No, that's good. That's fine. I'm fine. Everyone jumping in. I don't think I've ever been in on one where we didn't do that. Question leads to more questions. Mark, do you think that when educators are looking at a piece, so do they follow the criteria right away? Like, is Tessitura the first thing you look for right away, or is everything going piece by piece?
I think, in my experience and when I have spoken to people, the first thing that people look at is range, tessitura, and then musical density. And I think that can be part independence, instrumentation, rhythmic complexity. It just basically, if there's a lot of ink on the page, wow, this is too hard, or this is, those kind of questions. But I think when you go and look through the weeds and you really get that lens put on, the first thing they're going to look at is that range. And it seems to be, you go to this, like you were saying, the developmental issue. Can the trumpets go to that G? French horns up to an F? Clarinets above the break? A lot of people in the open-ended questions, that was the question, or that was the response they said between grade 2 and 3. Do the clarinets, is it over the break? And that's what everybody talks about. But that was the one common theme that came throughout with clarinets, obviously, is does it go over the break?
Right. Because I keep thinking, it's like, okay, let me say I pick up a piece and I look at it. All right, the range is not too high. And even technically, it's not that bad. But once you get the piece and you listen to it, it's like there's all these really funky jazz chords.
Right.
That, unless you're really studying the score when you first look at it or listen to a recording or something, you're not going to know that. And, younger players might have a tough time with, the intonation aspects and all of that, understanding that.
I think that would fall into the part independence, both rhythmically and harmonically, that the more parts that you have. So if you're talking, the orchestration of a huge, big jazz built chord, you got to have the understanding of intonation and part independence that goes with that. And that was obviously one of the factors that they had said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I was thinking more, not even really like where the parts are completely, like maybe all the instruments are playing a different, like all trombones have one note, tubas have one note, and everything. Not that anyone would necessarily make a piece quite like that, but
right.
Just for sake of argument there. I think the last question I have is, do you think, can there ever be a uniform criteria to figure out grade levels here? Because I think every question that I came up, which throughout your paper, eventually at some point you completely answered, and even in some of the problems that you might run into. But, you know, especially thinking, you know, I'm somebody who grew up playing all Hal Leonard music. And whenever I started teaching, I was doing all Hal Leonard music. So I've got that grading scale in. And then if I come to something like this, where I'm looking at your study or doing this, and then I go to do this, now I've got that Hal Leonard, you know, difficulty level imprinted in my brain. And can I look at things a different way to where it is? Because, you know, even when we look at other lists, I feel like National Band Association and you know, a lot of the lists that you mentioned, they're trying to take some of these and really consolidate and say, okay, here's where it is. But you still also have those people that say, well, they say it's a grade 4, but I really think it's a grade 5, no matter what you do. So I guess, you know, back to the original question, can there ever be a uniform criteria, and how do you accomplish that?
I don't think there can be. So Wareham, and he did the study in 1967 where he looked at the Voboda list, the NISMA list, and the NBA list, 800 titles altogether, and he found that 9% of the pieces were the same grade level. So that goes to what you're saying, that 9% out of 800. That's, yeah,
it's crazy.
And that means the states are already looking at whatever level it is, and they're deciding on their own, well, no, it's a grade 2. No, this is a grade 3. So if you have that many discrepancies that are gonna happen there, I don't see how all the publishers, you know, let's just say I create the ultimate, you know, band grading guide. I don't think all the publishers are gonna buy into that. And I think it's the fact of they don't have the personnel and the time to devote to that, because they've been doing it for so long. I mean, Carl Fisher is the oldest one in the world, dating back to the 19th century. I'm not sure they're going to change and just start aligning their standards with Hal Leonard or Alfred. And I think it's a money-making thing, because what's going to happen is if the music, it's going to change the way that they grade music. So their system is then going to become obsolete. It's going to have to be a standardized system. And I talk about the thing about the egalitarian paradox, where when you treat everyone the same, it then becomes inequality happens. And I think that that's probably what you're going to end up seeing there. That if we end up trying to do this standardized system, it's going to be problematic. So I wanted to look at it from a different perspective and show that those top 4 categories are extremely important. So when we are training teachers, have them look at that, have them know there's going to be a discrepancy, but when they're picking their music for their ensembles, they're able to match the curricular needs with the student ability levels and to be able to put that together.
Good. Yeah, I thought that the 1967 study.
Wareham, yeah.
Wareham, thank you. I thought that was interesting, but just because this exact thing has kind of been going on that long. You know, that there has been that discrepancy. Do you think it's closer now than what it was back then? Because I can see back then, there's a lot of people just saying, well, let's mark this as a grade 2, more people will buy it and everything. And then now I feel like people, they have like a much more educator minded approach to the grading.
Well, I think if you go back to the first band contest in 1926, they started developing grade level back then, and it was a 4-level system, then went to a 5-level system, and now is a 6-level system. So even as far back and into the early 20th century, they weren't agreeing upon what was going on. So as we come more forward now, I think it probably is more confusing because there's more bandwidth, so to speak. There are publishers, there are self-publishers, and there are music retailers. and everyone seems to have their own perception of what's going on. John Mackey, for instance, he grades his music based on the Texas list. And you'll see on his site, Strange Humors, it'll say, grade 5 PML or something like that. So he's not even grading the music. He's just kind of looking and I don't want to say guessing, but perhaps he is as to what it is, because I don't think someone like John Mackey is doing criterion-based grading. I think that he is writing music for the sake of the art, and he's doing that. I don't think he's saying, well, this is too many measures and this trumpet goes above here. I think he has a basic understanding of where that works. So I think now it's probably even more confusing just because there's so much more information out there.
Cool. All right, thank you. That's all I have right now.
Thanks.
Dr. Confredo, would you like to go next? Or would you
Sure.
rather wait?
You know what? Let me wait, and let's have Dr. Cornett follow up.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
I just have one more because I kind of kept interrupting Dr. Brunner and asking during his time. So sorry about that. So you mentioned the flow theory and the zone of proximal development. Can you talk a little bit more about how you intended those to factor into this study?
Sure. So with flow theory, I'm going to use the term in the zone. You always want your students to be in the zone because probably we're going to have the best musical performance when they're that way. When they're feeling good and they're really chugging along and they can play the music appropriately, that's the way to do it. I know I have played or I have programmed music that is too easy, and you can see that the students they don't buy in. And I feel like when we do a performance and they're playing music that's that one piece or whatever that's too easy, it's perhaps not as exciting and not as good. They just don't have the fire and excitement because they're just like, okay, this is below my level. The same thing will happen when it's that piece that's too hard, that they're going to be frustrated and they're never going to get into that zone where they can really lock in and feel good about what they're doing. So that's why I brought up the whole flow theory to try to be able to do that, because directors need to try to figure out how can we get our students to be in the zone. Now, there's a lot of other factors that go into that with motivation and other external factors, but we need to be able to try to work that out. And then with the zone of proximal development, that's where a student is going to be able to work on their own and try to be able to understand it, versus when the instructor, or a lot of times in Vygotsky, he would say to have other cooperative learning where other students would help and to go and do that, which is band. I mean, that is our band, whole thing that we've got going on there. And I believe it was Watson from University of Michigan did a whole study on ZPD in the band classroom, which was really fascinating because you have that whole idea of the social construct that we have in band class. You're not playing a solo, you've got to work together, you've got to do these things. And that flow theory, that if you can get the students to be at that level where they can then help each other, then they will hopefully be in that zone, and then we'll have a great performance.
So you're positing that a large part of getting into that zone is conductors, teachers choosing the right repertoire, correct? The right level?
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering, because you mentioned it at the beginning of the paper, and I read this twice to make sure I hadn't missed it. It doesn't really come back in your conclusions in any way. And I'm wondering if, as a suggestion of something you might want to consider, again, adding a paragraph or something, if you could bring that back at the end and say, I don't know exactly what that would look like, but it would just be nice to kind of tie that in, because it seems like it's an important part of the thought process. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can mention that again in the conclusions or the summary, or maybe even in the suggestions for further study.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. I think I got caught up in the discussion with the technical results aspect, interpreting that, but I didn't really think about that, I guess philosophically, that you need to be selecting literature that will ultimately give them a good experience. I was just focused on, you got to look at trumpet range because that's important.
And that makes perfect sense. So I would either say maybe that could be its own study in and of itself. So
Yeah.
you could just eliminate it from the beginning of the paper. But if you're going to keep it there, my suggestion would be to find a way to tie it in at the end, even if it's just in the further study section. But that's my 2 cents there.
Okay, no, that makes sense to do that. I think I also got focused on the literature and theoretical framework in chapter 2, and perhaps I didn't align that to chapter 5.
That's it for me, though. I'm happy to move on to someone else.
Then I'll jump in, and I'm going to take up that point again. I think that's a great point, and you're absolutely right, Trish. That needs to come back again, because there are, and Mark, you're right too, that you were really very trained on those elemental specifics, which you need to be, because that's what people were giving you, right? But at the same time, bringing back that idea of how to get your students at whatever level to that place where everybody's sort of, humming like an isotope all together, just being there. And that's ultimately where we want to get kids all the time, or to the extent that we can. That needs to come back as well. And actually and I totally agree with what Dr. Cornett's suggesting, that is, bring those ideas back in, at the end. And it leads me to something. I'm looking over here because I got my notes over here on this other screen. I'd like you to talk a little bit about coupling what you found, which has to do with, again, the specifics of issues of difficulty, right? Which in some ways is similar to, but in other ways different from, issues of selection of quality literature. And you cite my study a few times, right, in this in your dissertation. And as you know, I wrote about selection of quality, right, and didn't focus much at all on issues of difficulty or age level appropriateness, right, or I should say level appropriateness, not age level appropriateness. So thinking about what Dr. Cornett just said, and you bringing up the idea of issues of flow or proximal zone theory, bring those two things together if you could. Issues that you've uncovered in ideas about how do we determine difficulty, what are the bits and pieces of that, and how does that differ from, or how can that be connected with how people perceive quality in literature? Can you bring those two things together?
Sure. Well, I think if you really look at the few studies, the seminal studies, I guess, if you want to say, about quality of literature, with Osling and Wiggins, they all talk about common themes, that it's quality music, and that it's music that has artistic merit from the standpoint that it has longevity and it lives on. So some of those characteristics that talk about quality, the biggest issue is that quality, it cannot necessarily be defined because it's different for every person. However, I think the difficulty assessment is similar for every person, that we know that some of those things that we have to take a look at and have to do some of those items. What I have found that I have done, this is my personal experience, is I will look at some of those pieces that are on those lists that are defined as quality, even though that was 1978 with Osling, so we're 40 some years later to go with that. But to take those characteristics of what he said were quality, and then going up to the newer people, and then try to find, okay, that's a piece, and then apply that to the difficulty criteria that I came up with. I think I already had done some of those. I think we probably all have done those, used those criteria when we look at the things like Dr. Brenner was saying, that he looked at trumpet range and we got rhythmic complexity. I don't know if anybody has ever really written it down to say these are the checklists. So I think I'll use an example as undergraduate curricula. So if you have a repertoire class, or it's a music methods class where you're talking about conducting and things like that, you could list those pieces that are deemed quality, but then also define in there, this is why this is a grade 6, this is a grade 2, this is a grade 4. based on the criteria that I came up with.
Right. Good. Yeah, and you, as you're talking, I was kind of thinking back to what Dr. Brunner was talking about in terms of when he asked you whether or not we would ever get there, whether or not we would ever get to a uniform list. And you gave a very good answer to that. And of course, that answer is largely driven by the fact that it's a business.
It's money, yeah.
Yeah, it's business. And you know, we can stomp our feet all we want, but that ain't going away. So you know, thinking about this idea of how we make those selections, it just is it's just curious to me. I mean, he brought up a really good point about, you know, all these things can fit, right? You can have this piece has, you know, doesn't tax my trumpets, and rhythmically it's accessible, but then once you get that piece and you're actually living with it for a while, well, wait a minute, there's some really colorful chords here, and then it gets into your idea of part independence and that kind of thing. But it also gets into this idea about harmonies and whether or not that's something that people look at. And as you know, it's not, right? And I think that's the point he was making, when you got to live with it for a while, unless you can really audiate, you know, horizontally really well, or vertically rather, vertically really well. Which not a whole lot of people can do, right? Unless you live with it for a while, you're not going to figure those things out until you've studied and studied and studied, and then you'll be able to make those decisions. And so there's lots of things. You know, this is not just a one and done. I wanted to talk a little bit about your. You brought back the Acton Ostling piece and the Wareham piece, and you said, which is very appropriate, that what makes something quality is that it has longevity. And I think I talked a little bit about that in a couple of my works as well. My question to you is, then does that preclude anything new, you know, that comes out? And so suppose you write like the next rather than Holt's Suite in E flat, maybe it's the Lortz Suite in E flat, right?
Right.
And you become, and that piece comes out, and the world like it goes, but it has not been around for 80 years. And so therefore what about that criterion that both of those folks determined that it's got to be around for a long time? What about that? What happens to your piece? Do you have to wait until, you know, your grandchildren are collecting royalties on it for it to be considered quality literature?
I think that actually is an interesting social construct that you bring up, from the standpoint that music is just moving so quickly today that whoever is popular today, I'm not sure would be popular later. I'm gonna give a little anecdotal quote from Robert W. Smith. So if we think back to the early 90s, Robert W. Smith in the scholastic education music was, if not number one, probably one of the biggest people. You know, he said his Tempest, he put his daughter through college, you know, from the sales from that piece. But he also said now he is more like, what did he say? I think he said Dr. Pepper. He said he used to be Coke, but now he's Dr. Pepper. And some of his pieces haven't lived on. There's a handful that have. So I think that we have that now, and there's so many new pieces coming out every year that it's hard to say, is this piece going to last? So if you go back to the quality aspect of it, I think what happens nowadays is that because popular music is so rhythmic and short in motives, that if we have a piece of music that has a beautiful line, like in the, you know, I'm just trying to think what would be October. Let's talk about October, things like that. Students could be potentially bored by some of these things because and even though we think it's great quality, they get bored because it's slow and it's not that rapid fire that they hear every day with their video games. I mean, if you think about video games, there's no very little lyrical content in a video game. So I think that, and that goes to the point where you're trying to match ability level and also repertoire selection with what you think is difficult versus what students think is difficult. Mm-hmm. And that's something that Madsen came up with, that he said that you've got to be able to go and do that, which is very tough to balance that out. But to be able to establish what quality is now, I do think that that longevity, I mean, I think we can look at the criteria, what defines quality, which is going to be, you know, the great composition structure and musical content and things like that. But I think it's that longevity standpoint that's really going to determine what it is.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And it just kind of reminds me about, I know this for sure of Florida and Texas. I don't know about any other states that do this, but Florida and Texas go back to their lists all the time. And they throw things out and they put,
Yes.
and, you know, so what you're talking about with Robert W. Smith is exactly that issue. Okay. Oh, yeah, well, he's Dr. Pepper now, so we don't need that one anymore, you know,
Right.
the next Coke. Yeah. So, yeah, and it's capricious at best, and as you know, the people who populate those committees change over and over and over again, and so whose tastes and preferences are we bringing to the table at this point? Yeah, so I'm just going to leave you with one last thing because Dr. Reynolds needs to hop in here. And one thing, it's just kind of just thinking out loud on my part. It would be cool now, particularly because of what you just said, to go back to that study that I did in the early 90s and couple it now with what you did and take a look at those two things together, the difficulty and the quality, and to see what we would get today, given the fact that, you know, technology has really done a number on attention spans and the things that you're talking about. You know, we don't want kids to get bored, and where is that melodic piece, and is it still there, and what about the difficulty levels? There was one other quick thing. Give me just a second. Yeah, we can talk about that later. I think I'm done. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you. It's been a while since anybody said nice work on your presentation and also on your document. So I'll
Thank you,
bring
Dr.
that back
Reynolds.
to the front. And thank you for the opportunity to participate. The pinch hitter, I guess, but I'm still pleased to be here and it's nice to see you again. I had a couple questions that sort of dance around things people have been talking about. When I was reading your paper, a couple of things I made suggestions just about some of the language, which you and I realized, of course, when I was reading that you pointed out these are standard terms in the band world.
Right.
And I completely got that. I was just making suggestions about making sure it just seemed like sometimes those terms were not used consistently. And then that made me also think about, well, the grade level and the grading systems of publishers for band. Well, I should say you made a reference at one point about orchestra literature and publishers, I think. Do you remember in your paper?
I do.
And so I was just thinking, well, I was sort of morphing in and out of the band world because wouldn't all music educators benefit from difficulty levels? And so I think that was one of the questions I was also trying to get you to think about. That this is obviously a band focused study on band, a particular type of band repertoire, as you labeled it. And I was just thinking that there might be a way to, without a lot of writing, to just say, to open it up a little bit, because there are times in your paper where you're talking about conductors and you're talking about band teachers and band situations, and then all of a sudden for quite a while you're talking about music teachers and music educators. And so I can't quite tell if the purpose of that kind of broadening out is to say we're all dealing with it, because there's no sort of acknowledgement up front that the band persons aren't the only ones. You at least have ratings, like elementary people, right? They don't have it. You have to decide on other factors and other decisions. There might be a grade 6 book, but is grade 6, 6th grade really holding more complicated literature than grade 4? And if so, on what bounds? So I just thought it might be an interesting thing to reread your own paper just before you, maybe not right before you put it into the grad school, but like as you're reading, how can you focus in, make sure when you're speaking about music teachers and music educators that it hasn't been for a long time that you've said band, something about the band teacher, so that we don't get lulled into, oh, you're thinking about all music teachers, or you're only thinking about music teachers as band teachers. And I don't know that either of those are true, but
Right.
I hope that makes sense. In other
It-
words, I asked the question about, is there a type of publisher in music education that couldn't think about difficulty level? And I think my question might not have been clear
Right.
by the response that you gave, but I think that's what I've tried to say here, is that, like, we're all facing groups we don't know at some point, and we're all choosing music for them if we're in that kind of rehearsal performance mode. So I think it's a link that's kind of missing from your narrative, that
Yeah.
it's obviously it's a band study, and so I'm not saying it shouldn't focus on band,
Right.
but it's just, I thought that was a point that could work. And then when you're talking about flow and the zone of proximal development, then you're touching in again on something that we all are seeking, even in informal music learning situations. How does a group in the garage band, in the garage, how do they choose music? Or, you know, which YouTube video are they going to that'll
Right.
speak to them by difficulty level? So it's nice that this study resides well and resonates with your band colleagues, and then there's the rest of us, or the other parts of us.
Sure. If I could add to that, I did mention Ralston's study, and she developed, just like Seville, a vocal pedagogy instrument to judge the difficulty of repertoire. So in my study, what I have found is that vocal teachers have done that. They have looked at what determines difficulty level, and band teachers really have not, and string players have not done it at all, which possibly for future studies would be, we're all in the same boat. We all need to develop how do you determine what is grade level appropriate? So I think that your suggestion is good. I think I probably need to say band directors, and then have a transition to talk about, and in other, categories, they do this in other genres.
It's just fun that I could make that connection, and I yearn to be sort of a part of your audience in that way. I'm wondering, it seems like the way you described, you asked in the survey whether the participant responding recognized or knew already the grade level or the difficulty level of a piece. That's correct?
And you mean when they were looking at the excerpts?
Yeah, when they were in the survey itself.
The question was, what is the grade level of this piece? And then the second question was, why did you rate it that way? So it was, the first was a Likert 1 through 6 checkbox, and the second was an open-ended question.
In the narrative of your paper, you say something about, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but you say that to take care of the familiarity, you ask them if they knew the publisher's difficulty level. Am I misunderstanding?
I did not, I asked them if they had an awareness of the publisher rating systems, just globally speaking about that, not anything specifically or anything specific to a piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't. You said something about meticulous attention to detail, so I guess I better demonstrate that in a public venue. But the reason I asked that is because I was thinking about familiarity, and you mentioned during your presentation about, or maybe you said it in conversation, I don't remember actually, but you mentioned that the Circus Maximus piece is much harder than the difficulty level that came apart, and that it's 45 minutes in length, etc. But of course that excerpt was not the whole thing. So that when people were looking at it, maybe they weren't familiar with the piece. Do you think that's possible, or they forgot about the rest of it? So I'm wondering about familiarity in general. I'll come back to that in a minute. And on page 57 of the draft that I have, no, sorry, I think I slipped. I think the way you word it is that, the way you worded it, I protected against the possibility of a subject being familiar with a specific piece and publisher by asking the subjects to note whether they are familiar with the publisher identified difficulty rating for a piece in the open-ended answer. So suggested to me that for each one you said, do you know the difficulty level already of this piece?
That probably was a little bit of an assumption on my part that I wanted to, and that's probably something I should go back and do. I did not ask them that specific question. What I asked them was simply, are they familiar with rating systems? And I was hoping to gain some knowledge in there, and I did, because they were saying those different things. As far as the familiarity, I removed anything that would identify the piece. So I removed the title, I removed the arranger, the composer, the publishing information at the bottom. So it was just the musical manuscript. Although I did talk to some people afterwards that said, oh, I knew that piece, or I played that piece before, or something like that. So they did know it. My thought from all of this is the majority of people did not know the pieces, because some of them are a little obscure. That I chose, and I didn't do that on purpose. That was just through the randomizer that it picked that way. I think I had a good blend of pieces that people may have played and pieces that were definitely more obscure.
Yeah, I was just wondering what you thought about if you had a question, and familiar is different from I have performed it. Like I've heard
Right.
it, or I knew I've already looked at this one
Great.
and dismissed it because it was too difficult for my band. But I wonder, what might you have learned from asking them specifically about their familiarity as they're analyzing and defining what familiar might mean, as in I have performed this piece before, or I have conducted it.
I think
What might you have learned?
I think that's a great question, because I had a colleague who said, yeah, number 8, the core of discovery, I did that last year with my elementary school band. He said, I don't know how, he was joking, I don't know how I did on guessing these, but I know I got one of them right. Which I thought was pretty funny. But I do think that would be worthwhile. Just another question in there, have you performed this piece, or do you know this piece, or have you seen this piece, could be worthwhile, because that would definitely show some bias and dismissing the results.
Maybe, yeah, maybe, I don't know, would it be biased and would it dismiss? Because another question I sort of had is, like, in a perfect world, or not in a perfect world, maybe in a different study. And another way to go after this information is to ask band directors, have you ever played or selected a piece where the difficulty level, you forget what it was either marked as, or choose what it was marked as by the particular publisher. Have you ever performed a piece where you're just like, that was perfect? That difficulty rating was exactly right, because it challenged, when I chose it and rehearsed it with my band, it challenged them. We were in the flow, we were in the zone, and that's really ace. So would band directors, with their particular context, be able to say, perfect? Do you think it ever aligns?
I don't think so, and here's why: because of player ability level. You may have it's not a one-stop shop fits all, which I'm beginning to find with online teaching. Because it's like, when you're trying to, there's not one program maybe that works really well, or something like that. But what I have found out in my experiences is that, let's say I've got a piece of music that fits every section really well, but I have a weak clarinet section. So that piece, everybody may not be in the zone because the clarinets are struggling, or it could be a great clarinet section and it's too easy for them. And that's what Seville specifically mentioned in his study, was there is no specific difficulty instrument, meaning like a grading instrument, that allows you to see what the difficulty level is for each individual part. And that's what he created in his study.
Okay. So then it seems like there's a lot on the director when choosing a piece that's more
Right.
challenging. What about the role of the conductor? So in one place you said it's, selecting the music is solely reliant on the conductor. And then there's some schools of thought, and there are national standards now where students are asked to select and do things with repertoire. So there's that possibility now that maybe we invite our students to help choose the music. So I guess I can imagine a conductor choosing from a particular level that they think is appropriate for an ensemble, and say, from these few pieces, which ones would you like to perform, like, so they can
Yeah.
select the repertoire. And then now it's either you or a student conductor in front. Do you use the checklist that you've devised to help prepare the score for the students? What's the relationship between the checklist and then the job of the conductor to raise the group to the level? Because it seems like matching is not always 100% possible, and ideally you're always pulling them along, right? So
Right.
does your checklist have rehearsal functions as well, or do you think those are separate?
I think it's planning and which ultimately leads to the rehearsal function. So if we talk about rhythmic complexity, knowing that that's going to be a factor in the score because there's a lot of difficult rhythms, I think that you need to pull out those rhythmic motifs, and you would include those in your warm up, in your preparation. Maybe you make a rhythm sheet, and you would use that every day doing your scale patterns. So then you would have that transfer of knowledge and the tie-in that would go in. So let's just say you have a student conductor. You would have to mentor them to be able to do that within the warm up. And then the band students would be able to understand the rhythmic complexity, and then they would apply that in the piece. The same thing with, we would talk about the tessitura. If the trumpets go up very high, perhaps we're doing some lip slur type exercises that would help them to do that. But you're always including that in the preparation materials, so when they apply it in the class, it's okay. And that's what I was talking about with the undergraduate curriculum. If we can identify that, then we can also identify teaching methods and lesson planning that would help for rehearsal planning.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about those novice music teachers that you do touch on in your conclusions, and about how can we guide them with determining difficulty level for ourselves and the group we're working with, and then preparing the scores, right? Preparing the rehearsals. It seems like there was a nice unifying possible factor there, like your checklist for the things you were asking your persons to rate. So I didn't know if you already use those same kinds of materials with your beginning, your pre-service or early teachers in professional development.
I do, but it's never been formalized. I think as educators, I think the biggest problem right now is that when we were in undergraduate curriculum, there was so much to do in so little time. So we usually talk about what is good literature. This is the quality literature, but we don't always necessarily talk about the grade selection and what is grade level appropriate. So it's my hope that if we glean from this that there are 4 factors. And when you pick your, incantation and dance, or what are these, staple band pieces, that you're looking at those 4 factors to help determine, well, my band can play this because we can meet this criteria, or maybe it's a little too hard and we need to consider something else.
So if I switch gears and Google Earth zoom way out from any particular band or other kind of literature, let's talk about you as a researcher in the midst of a dissertation process. What were some of the most surprising challenges in designing and collecting data, interpreting? What kinds of things pop to your mind is like, I just would never have thought that would have happened, or besides us promote in presentation mode remotely because of the coronavirus.
Right.
We never would have predicted that. But what are the surprises along the way that caught you and you overcame?
The design of the survey. And Dr. Bonviri's class, we did, different surveys and rubrics and things like that. And I always thought I was really good at doing those. And then I had to design this and think not only from a quantitative perspective, but I think also the qualitative content analysis and how to align all of that together. Because that was a big issue, was how would I get all of these open-ended question answers? And then I had to code all of them, and I had to find out the trends. So I thought that was very difficult. And then getting the scores to be able to, I've never dismantled a musical score before. I've always created the musical score. So I thought that was particularly challenging, designing the survey instrument to do that. That I was surprised. It took me probably almost 2 months to really design that survey. It was frustrating because I thought I thought it would just be boom, I'll just do this. And it really took a lot of time to do that. And, there were some other technical challenges that went with it. So that the instrument itself was challenging. I thought I had several preconceived notions that I thought respondents were going to say. I thought that they would say that instrument range, tessitura, would be very important. It was. I also thought that they would say that composition length was a factor. And I think that's part of my own bias, that when I write things, I'm always looking, because I was scolded once for writing too many notes, that I always think about that as a composer. But I always thought the composition length really determines the difficulty of the piece, especially from a fatigue point of view. I want to do this piece of music, but I don't know if we have the horses to be able to play this for 10 minutes or something like that. But directors, at least in this study, didn't seem to think that that was an issue. It was more the nuts and bolts of, do I have the right trumpets to play this? Do the clarinets go over the break? Are there a lot of density that goes on there? And it was interesting to hear Dr. Brenner talk about the fact that, talk about harmonic considerations. I hadn't really even thought about that. And maybe it's the way I asked the questions, because I asked, is, tessitura important? Is this important? But maybe harmonic considerations, maybe that needs to be in there. I did not find, none. I found very little support in the open-ended questions where people mentioned harmonic and melodic content. It was very much the analytical side of repertoire selection. So those were some of the things I think that I found out that was most interesting with all of that.
I've enjoyed hearing you talk about the survey and the challenges. Thanks for sharing that. Were you able to? How did you pilot the survey, or did you do that?
Mm-hmm. I did it with.
Did you write about that?
I did not, because it was an informal one. I mean, I was doing it more with one or two people. I didn't do a formal, and it was more for functionality. I knew that the questions were going to work for the most part, because I'd worked with Dr. Confredo and some of them, but I was more concerned about being able to see the music and how to actually make that work. There's a variety of platforms you can use for survey design, but none of them really allow you to do, I like the website Izu, ZZUSU, and that has sheet music on there, and it scrolls across, and you can just press play and you can do that. But that plugin it's not really possible. And then I thought about YouTube links and doing some of that, but then I couldn't get the discriminating data off of the music. So that's why I had to go with PDFs, and that they would scroll through and do that. So hopefully it was fairly seamless. I know on my end, designing it, it took a lot more that went into it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your answers, and for the opportunity to think about how difficult things can be.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds.
So at this point, Dr. Confredo, do you think we should do a breakout room, or do you want to just invite people to come back with the same link? What would you like?
Let me ask if this would be a good time if anyone else out there has any.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, and so in order to do that, everyone will need to unmute, and if you want to see us, go ahead and turn your camera on, and if you'd like to ask a question, I would say just go ahead and ask, and Mark can hear you. Okay, so
thank you,
and if you don't, I'm sorry, Dr. Reynolds, and if you don't have a question, just stay muted, but you can put your cameras on if you'd like.
And I think we have about 10 minutes for this portion. Do you think that's about right, Dr. Confredo?
I think that's perfect, yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Hey, Mitch.
Hi, everybody. Oh, it's so good to see everybody, even though virtually, and everybody's healthy and everything. Mark, thanks for your presentation. This was great. I really enjoyed it. My question is sort of in the vein of one that Dr. Cornett asked, in that at the beginning of your paper, you talk about that repertoire selection is a vital part of curriculum and of curricular development. But then at the end of your presentation, I haven't read the back end of your paper, so you may in fact discuss this in your paper, But at the end of your presentation, you didn't bring back in that context of how do your findings fit into the context of curriculum and curricular development. And as you know, we don't have a standardized national curriculum for music, for band. And so the curricular approaches and curricular content vary widely in different classrooms and across different geographic areas. And that lack of standardization there is sort of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it gives teachers a lot of freedom to create the content for their class, but that freedom can also result in some rambling and some less than focused instruction. And so I'm wondering, it's sort of a two-part question. Do you feel like the lack of agreement in repertoire grade levels is a function of that lack of standardization of curriculum? And then do you think that some of the measures that you were talking about with trying to standardize, or at least have a standardized information process, might either depress some of the freedom or might constrain some of the rambling of that lack of curriculum?
Well, first and foremost, it's great to see you. I do want to acknowledge that Mitch has helped me tremendously along the way. He's read a few versions of my paper and has done his best to rip it apart and rebuild it for me. So thank you for all of that. I really do appreciate that. To answer the first question, I think that this whole issue, would we end up, and I'll tie them both together, would we stifle, the director's creativity and things like that? I don't think so. I think that would be, I think you can choose your own type of music and you can choose your own grade level and things like that. I think that you'd be able to do that fine. But is it related to what is in our curriculum? I don't think that band directors necessarily look at their curriculums and say, oh, this is a grade 1, so this will meet these standards and things like that. I think it's more about what's going to be good for your students, the level of appropriateness, and are they going to be able to achieve the piece and play the piece well. Do you think that in your experience that you went and you looked at, I guess, in the PG County manual to see, if you were matching things?
You're asking that back to me?
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have a specific curriculum like that, but I did design a curriculum for myself. I actually created these big spreadsheets of all of the different technical and musical criteria I was looking for in a set of repertoire. And then after I developed all those criteria, then I would pick pieces and I would check off all the boxes, and I wasn't done picking pieces until all of my little boxes were checked. So I did, try to match my repertoire selection to a curriculum framework that I had designed before the repertoire selection process.
Right, which I think is absolutely great and incredible to do, but I don't think most band directors, to answer your question, I don't think most band directors go that route. I think they're looking at, and sometimes survival mode, like I have music assessment that I have to do, and I've got to get a 1 or a 2, and I have to choose music that meets grade 4 level, but we can play it because I have really weak clarinets. I think that's where the level of a lot of band directors are thinking, because teacher evaluation is often reflected upon your music assessment scores. So they're not necessarily looking at curriculum. It's almost, what can I do to keep my job?
And that's a whole other can of worms.
Yes.
I think you're right, but that's a whole other issue.
Right.
Another question from the group of visitors? Well, back to Dr. Confredo. Do you think the breakout room is better or leaving?
What I think is best is for everybody to leave the meeting, not except for the committee, but Mark included. Everybody except for the committee should leave the meeting. And what time is it? It's 11:41. Dr. Reynolds, what do you think? 11:51 for people to return?
12:51 Eastern time?
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Sorry.
Sounds
Yes.
good.
on Eastern time. And what will happen, everyone, is you'll come back and you'll be in a waiting room, and I will bring you back in. Use the same link that you did to get in, okay? What will happen is I'll add Mark first. We'll talk to Mark, and then we'll let the rest of you back in, all right? So we'll see you in a few minutes.
Nice to see there's so many people in
Yeah,
on this.
17 at the maximum. We still have a few people on. Hang on. If you are still on the call, please.
It was almost so complete. We just saw it last night, and it was not that. Yeah, here.
We have two.
And Dale.
One more to go. Dale Pappas needs to leave the room at this point.
You could put her in a breakout room.
Why does that matter?
Left for a moment.
An egg is an egg is an egg, right?
The waiting room.
I know that 2 scrambled eggs.
Somebody's talking about scrambled eggs.
Scrambled eggs. Yeah.
Oh my! Hey, thanks everybody for your help. This was it's an interesting time for everybody, and I appreciate all of your insights and your help, and your discussion was great. Thanks to Allison for serving as the chair for the committee. So
Yes.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
So Deb,
I had a question. Could I ask you guys a question first, just in the paper in general? And this is just kind of for me, because maybe it's okay, but I figured you guys could answer it. There was a lot of times where he used the term difficulty level that was hyphened. Is that correct? Because I started marking, I think, but then I just stopped because I was like, well, maybe I'm wrong on this. Because I think I was always in the thinking that just don't hyphenate anything unless it's absolutely necessary.
I think that's a good catch, Matt, and I think that the issue is just be consistent and across the board. So,
because I think he was consistent as far as he was using it, because it was always using it as an adjective, but difficulty level as that, and then difficulty level not hyphened was just difficulty was
right.
Level was the noun. So
right, and I can address that with you. Absolutely.
Okay.
In that vein, I've got about 10 or 12 tiny little typos or just grammatical things, awkward sentences that I can just type up and put in an email. Copy you, Deb, if that's okay.
That's perfect. Yeah, he's got until, I don't know, was it April 30th, I think? It's a
30 days.
Sorry, say again?
Is it 30 days from defense?
Well, not
or
now.
Fewer because
Right.
of the
Now because of where we are in terms of quote graduation. And Krista Viola is just slammed right now. So, just get stuff to him. I think if you do it the way Trish is suggesting via email and CC me, he's ready to sort of, make those changes and get this done at ASAP. And I think he's got a little bit more time right now because his ensembles aren't meeting. And anyway, but yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
cool.
So in terms of the kinds of changes from today, do we want to summarize the points, or do you think from the recording, or Deb, did you take notes? Is there anything
I
we
took notes. Yeah, I took notes. I'm going to give him that. I'll also give him access to the recording. Yep.
So if I recall correctly, the levels of vote, I don't have the paperwork in front of me like we usually, but the levels of vote are to pass without any changes, but it sounds like there are some we're suggesting. The next level is pass and with revisions in consultation with the advisor. And then there's a pass with revisions where the committee would need to want to see it again though before, and then there's not pass. Is that correct, Deb, the 4 levels?
Yeah, it's basically correct. So it's if not pass would be, and you have to come back. There's only 2 levels. There's pass and no pass. So no passes, you get 1 more shot. The pass, and it can be, oh, you don't have any changes to make, or you do have changes to make, and that's contingent on what we give to him. So it's not defined in the university form. So, and what we usually say is, yeah, these changes should be made before you turn things into to the graduate school. So, does that make sense?
Yep.
So in other words, the only time the committee would come back together again would be if he did not pass the defense. If you want to see the revised document, which I think he should just give you once he's done, we can he should do that.
So I don't think there's any sound of not pass. So it's just pass with revisions.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Me too.
Thanks, Matt. Very good. You know what? Let me text him and ask him to. Well, one more time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you more than I can say, and I know he does too. This was Mark is not an academic in the research sense of the word, you know, and this was a challenge for him. But I think he enjoyed it once he got past that hard part, you know. I think it is going to inform what he does in the future, and he was very excited to talk about this with everybody today. So thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Just on a personal level, it was nice to kind of be with colleagues again in a kind of stimulating way. It's
I do. In a way where we're actually teaching rather than, you know, preparing to do things, right? Let me text him and we'll get him back on before everybody else. Hang on a second.
Yeah, Trish, this is the first time I've seen you in a month and a half.
I know. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I think we should just somehow have an open door in our Zoom, not for bombing, but like, you know, Patricia, I'd see you walk past in the mornings or in the evenings and we have a quick hello. That would be nice.
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
zooming past virtually.
It was sweet to see you petting your little Poco. That was very.
He's a little needy.
Once in a while, being a little pain.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see the door behind me is a closet, and you open it up, and there on the one side there's shelves for, you know, officey stuff, and then there's another door that goes into a storage space, and he likes to go in there and pad around. So if I'm in the office and the door's not open, then he cries. But you know, then if I and then people are looking into the attic, so that's not good either. He's logging on now, so we'll give him a moment.
Okay.
And I'm glad that the waiting room worked. You know, they kind of put the fear of God into me when we had the thing about the Zoom bombing, you know, which I haven't had experience with, but you know, this seemed to work. Any info that anybody knows about regarding graduation yet? Anybody know what's out there?
No, I've heard it's just on hold.
Yeah.
Still, and not looking promising.
Here he comes.
All right, I think I'm in.
Are you all connected? Well, hello, Dr. Lortz. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Congratulations, yay!
Thank you very much.
The committee has decided that you got hand clapping. I don't know if you can see it or not.
I can.
The committee's decided to pass you, and there's some revisions. So you got Dr. Reynolds' revisions, and of course some of the things she talked about as well. And Doctors Brunner and Cornett will, if they have other things, they're going to pass them along to you in an email, CCing me. Make revisions as soon as possible with the your best researcher hat on. And as you get ready to send that to Krista, go ahead and send your new and final copy to your committee. Okay.
Okay.
You feel good? How do you feel?
Good. I told Dr. Confredo yesterday, this dissertation has taken 10% of my life. So it's good. 5 years.
Right. Yeah, it sounds about right.
But yeah,
so you have less hair now.
Something like that.
We've got 6 people waiting, so I'm going to give them just a moment before I bring them all back in. Okay. This would be the time when we would eat cheese and crackers and cookies and we'd hug and everything. So after we're done, I'm going to go downstairs and snack a little. So. Okay.
There you go. Right. Yeah. High five. Well, thank all of you for being a part of it. Yeah, I got no words other than thanks.
Well, there you go. I'm going to bring your loved ones in. I'm going to admit all of them, and you can give them the good news. All right. Let's give them a chance to get in. Okay. I think we've got 11 people in. Ladies and gentlemen, you can turn your cameras on if you'd like. If you want to go to gallery view, you'll be able to see everybody. And please let me present to you for the very first time. Probably I feel I'm officiating at a wedding. The very first time, Dr. Mark Lortz. Yay!
You got it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is your adoring public here, Mark.
Yes. So thank you guys. Yeah. Let's go to a restaurant. Oh wait, maybe not.
Yeah, our entire process has become sort of wonky, hasn't it? But you did a great job, and I think everybody here, I'll speak for everybody. I think everyone's very, very proud of you. This is a momentous occasion, and you'll be able to talk about this for decades to come, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess this is the first time you guys have ever done a dissertation like this, right?
Yes, it is.
Well, you can use me as a resource on, the thoughts that go into it, and I actually thought it was good. I mean, I didn't really have a whole lot of issues. A few of those technical things with Google, it started happening this morning, and I don't know what it was, but other than that, I thought it actually went, like, technologically speaking, really well.
I would agree, and we've got a nice recording too. In fact, I'm going to give you the recording, access to the recording, and I'll give you the notes that I took as well, so you can use both those things when you're making those revisions that you're asked to do. Okay.
Okay.
I think the only others, at least committees that I've been on, we've had maybe one committee member either Skype in. We weren't using this at the time, Skype or WebEx in. I think Dr. Dillio, because she spends an awful lot of time out of the country. I've been on a few music therapy ones where she's come in remotely, but this is the first time where everyone has been remote, and it was great. And you had there were 17 at the biggest participant number was 17, so you had a lot of people. Oh, wow. Yeah, it was good.
That's great. Well, good. Well, I hope everybody stays happy and healthy, and we get through this, and there's football in the fall, and everything resumes.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Resumes.
So again,
resumes.
Yes.
Somebody had to. Well, listen. Thank you, everybody, especially to the committee. Appreciate you, and everybody else who was on the call. Thank you for your support of Mark. Mitch, thank you for being his sort of mirror a little bit. That's great that you were able to give him feedback. I'm going to ask everybody at this point to leave the meeting. I want to stay on with Mark for just a few minutes so we can kind of do a recap, and stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you once again. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there paperwork that needs to come after this?
What you need to do is just connect with Ed by email saying thumbs up, and then mention Mark's name, the dissertation name, that we met and that you recommended pass with revisions that he's going to get to the grad school. Okay.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Great.
Guys, take care. Be well.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Congratulations.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
We got Lewis is still on.
My dad, get off.
I'm gonna
Quit.
remove him.
Okay. He may have left.
He may have. Yeah. Well, good for you. Congratulations. You feel all right?
I do. Yeah, I feel good. Unfortunately, I have to do a department chair meeting at 1:30 or no 2:30 after this, because I'd rather not do anything at all. But that's okay. I'm just going to be like, yeah, whatever you guys want to do is fine.
Yeah. We've got one coming up in an hour too. So yeah, I hear that. But do whatever you guys can do tonight, as you know, a couple, and include your puppy, to do something celebratory. You know, I know that it would be nice to go out. If you can maybe do takeouts, do something for yourself. You need to be able to just enjoy the moment, because it's this is, I mean, we knew that this is what the outcome was going to be, but it's never really over till it's over, you know. So.
Right, and there'll be revisions, and I assume Dr. Reynolds took notes, because I did not take any notes.
I took notes.
Oh, okay.
I took notes, and basically I took notes about the questions and some of the things that I think you should focus on, you know. Not a lot. There's not a lot. You've already addressed most of her concerns. And I think Dr. Cornett says she has about 8 or 9 little things, mostly awkward sentences, just like itty bitty little things. She's going to send those to you in email. I don't know if Dr. Brunner is going to send you anything, but he may. Excuse me. But it won't be a lot. You've addressed the main points, and I think what was discussed today was actually, I was glad it went in this direction. People were talking about some of the more, some of the stuff where you can you have a little bit more elbow room, right? This is why I really love that doing the last chapter, is that it gives you license, you know, and they were identifying some things that you have not yet taken license with. So spend some good thought time on those things. The other stuff isn't, you know, the things that are more academic, you know, more checklisty kind of things, they're not going to take a lot of time. But the last chapter, bringing some things back, doing a little bit more speculation might take a little bit more time, particularly in terms of how you're going to fit it in. And then just work it in so that it makes that last chapter more colorful, you know.
Do you think that I should bring back the flow and the theoretical framework?
Yeah, I would insofar as one of the goals that we need to get to is not only curricular, but also that other element of performing music together in a group, right? And without getting too, excuse me just a second, I'm getting rid of a reminder. And without getting too deep into the psychological idea of it, because you don't want to go there, selecting music that will give your students as many optimal experiences or opportunities for the most optimal experiences as possible, right? And so, I mean, you gave a good example in your discussion about, I'll keep recording. You gave some good ideas in your discussion about when you pick things that are too easy, you don't perform as well because nobody's invested in it. Too hard, you don't perform as well because it's too unattainable. So where is that sweet spot? Well, the sweet spot is here where we are, and a tad further, right? And then if we add a piece of music, I'm talking about globally in terms of large program, we add something that doesn't take a whole lot of rehearsal time, but isn't juvenile, right? In terms of my performance skills, then that's like having a balanced plate for dinner, right? So talk a little bit about that in terms of flow and optimal experience. Yeah, but I don't get too ensconced in the theoretical framework, but do bring back that experience, and that's being part of our jobs as music educators. And we want to provide not just the technical aspects, but how can we get to that something that's less tangible, something that's more feelingful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then the curricular, some of those things to bring those back as well.
Sure. Yep, I would. Yep. And Dr. Brenner brought back the idea about the hyphenation, right? Do you really want that? So go back and look at that. He had a question about is that what we really wanted in terms of uh, uh, level appropriateness, level whatever it is, level difficulty level.
Difficulty level. I think it needs to be consistent throughout the document.
Too.
I'm just trying to think, should it be grade level appropriate or difficulty level appropriate?
Well, difficulty level appropriate. Yeah, you could do it that way. Yeah.
And just be consistent.
Or level appropriate difficulty, you know.
Okay.
Kind of roll that around in your tongue a little bit, see what you think.
I know that I got it a little, and I think this happened because I was writing the document at different times.
Right.
But I would say concert band directors, I would say conductors, I would say music educators. I think it just needs to be the same. And
right, it does. It needs consistency.
Just
right.
Concert band directors, do you think?
I think so. That's specific. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you know, going back to what Dr. Reynolds said, you know, make a few more global statements at the end that, you know, like she said, would bring people like her kind of into the discussion a little bit, right?
Right. Okay.
All right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I'll send you the link to the recording. It'll take a little time for it to render, and then I'll send you. I'm pointing to my notes. I'll send you my notes, and you can kind of go from there. And if you have questions about the notes, I was kind of doing hieroglyphics as I was going through.
I'm sure.
Like there was one thing that she said, Dr. Reynolds said, is there a type of publisher that would not need to think about difficulty? We're all choosing music for students we don't know. And I wrote parenthetically, I don't quite get what she was asking. So
right.
Yeah. So anyway, okay.
That works.
Okay. And there are some things that I have, some questions that I didn't talk about. And I'm going to keep them there. So you might want to just.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
I'll do that. So time frame wise, I know there's no graduation per se, but I think the date is the 20th. Everything needs to be completed.
Yeah, and remember that Krista's slammed, right? So the sooner you can get this to her, the better, right?
Okay.
And going by her advice, if you follow that, the handbook to a T, you shouldn't have any issues. Just be sure that whatever you hand into her is what you think is the very best you can do based on what the handbook is telling you in terms of formatting.
Okay. Yeah, the only question I had was about that one table.
Yeah.
Horizontally, I didn't really go to the edge, and I think the chart needs to go to the edge. I think that's APA. I had it like here.
Right.
I mean, nobody picked up on it, but that was me looking at it.
Well, I don't think anybody, you know, I mean, to me, it didn't matter. It didn't matter to anybody in your committee. If that's the only thing, and she says, "Oh, you got to fix this," then fine. Just I would leave that rather than messing with it right now, and just let her respond to it. My guess is she's going to say, "No, this is fine."
Okay. All right.
I could be wrong.
Yeah. So wow, all this hasn't really sunk in yet.
It won't. It will in a while.
I've had, you know, aside from the Corona deal and everything, I've had a hell of a semester. Personally, you know, I didn't tell you a whole lot about this because I didn't want, you know, craziness to go on. But in January, my wife Kate filed for separation.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so when you said that, I just wanted to and.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
She never really liked being here in Maryland. She originally lived in Cleveland. When her mom got sick in 2013, she moved out here to be with her mom. Her mom passed away, and we moved her dad to Florida in August of this past year. And her family's down there too. And I think she just wasn't happy, didn't know what was going on. So she actually left on January 29th, took her stuff, loaded the car, took the dog, and say goodbye. And she did file separation papers, which is a little more permanent. I can't really, we haven't had much conversation. I mean, she definitely has got things going on, and no relationship is perfect, but those kind of things happen. So I guess serendipitously, it afforded me the opportunity to focus on this because it gave me something to really think about. So this dissertation means more to that. I did include her in the acknowledgments because she's still a part of my life. And I just didn't say my wife. I just said,
right.
Special thanks to Kate for all that. She doesn't know I'm defending today because we haven't really had much conversation, and that's okay. Ultimately, I don't think there's going to be reconciliation because she decided to move 3,000 miles away or 2,000 miles away, but you never know. I think she's going through a lot. The death of her mom in March of 2016 affected her more than, I think more than she realized. And I don't think she's ever really been the same since then. And then coupled with her family being down in Florida and she's just homesick and wants to be with them. I think she needed to get herself set.
Sure. So. Yeah, I was wondering because she wasn't here. You hadn't mentioned her, but I thought, yeah, well, it's not my business. So I'm so sorry. It's it's not easy having been through it. It is not easy, even a little bit. And it is what it is. One of our doctoral students right now is going through that. She had to move out of her house last week, in the middle of all the COVID stuff. Had to physically move out. So yeah, it's I understand, I do. And if you put your energies into this and it gave you time for focus, then that's a good thing that came out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the way I looked at it. And I mean, it couldn't have been any more serendipitous that I had that opportunity. And as terrible as COVID is, I mean, I could take the time to focus on this. So that's the positive I'm taking out of it. And it'll be what it'll be. There's just to say that I was devastated when it first happened, absolutely, and I still think about it. But you've been there, you just gotta put your best foot forward and move on, and
it's like a gut punch. It truly is like a gut punch, and but there is life afterwards, so keep on doing what you're doing.
If I could ever get outside.
You will. Favor, keep laughing like that because I want to take a screenshot because I'm going to put this up on Facebook because people need to know. So smile. Good.
Did you get it?
I did. I think I did. Yeah. So, yep. I took a picture of you smiling and me going like that.
No, I appreciate it. It's been great. I can't thank you enough for what's going on. And there's a bit of a fear factor for me with the sarcoidosis that I have. I've got lung damage, and that would be I'm not immunocompromised because I'm not on steroids or anything like that. But it would definitely hit me harder than most people. So I haven't gone out, which is fine. I go to the grocery store and I'm pretty much wearing a zookeeper mask and gloves and
well, and you should, and you absolutely should. Yeah. Everybody's just got to be just incredibly careful. And we are both in spots where things are not good. So the more careful you can be, the better.
Yeah, people are just dumb. I mean, they're dumb everywhere, but that fish market.
Oh my God, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's going to get worse this week. That's what they're saying. The other thing that's going on, I have a 98-year-old grandmother, and she had some heart issues and breathing issues in January. We're not so sure if she didn't have it, but she was put in hospice. She's the only person that I know that goes to hospice and gets better.
I've known one other person, but that's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
So she's currently in hospice, and they announced last Sunday that one of the people in hospice had COVID. So she is completely quarantined to her room, and she's 100% with it. that's what's scary. And she's like, this is bullshit. Is what she told me.
Good for her.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, we got to get you to 100. You can't go yet and everything.
Right.
She's like, oh, yeah, all right. But yeah, because they're not letting anybody in, for in those type of facilities. And yeah.
Yeah, I've got in one of the class in my perception and cognition class, I've got 9 therapists and 9 educators, and I've got a few therapists who are hospice therapists, and they have been asked not to practice therapy, music therapy, but to be there, suit up, and just be with these people. And they said the most heartbreaking thing is, people are dying, maybe because of COVID, maybe not, and their families can't
be there. Yeah.
It's just it's heartbreaking,
And furthermore, when you go to the funeral, they're not allowing everyone to gather. It's one person at a time to walk in and walk back. And
right. Yeah. It's just an awful time. Just an awful time. And hopefully we'll get through it. But you're right. People need to be smart about it. And, you just don't want to smack these people sometimes, People anyway. Well, I'm glad you told me about Kate. But do something nice for yourself tonight. Whatever.
I'm going to my dad's. We're going to do a cookout and everything, so that'll be good. I'll wear my gloves and my mask, but
good.
Yeah, no, he said bring your favorite adult beverage and we'll do a little bit of a cookout. So that's the plan.
What is that? What is your favorite adult beverage?
Beer. I don't think I've ever. The only beer I don't like are the sours. Like those things but I mean I like stouts, I like IPAs, I like all those things. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like it when my mouth puckers after I drink it because it's a sour or it tastes like armpit sweat.
Right.
And they're like, oh, this is so good. I'm like, no, this Goza is awful.
It's swill.
Right.
We're getting dangerously low on vodka, and that's my go-to. So we'll have to see where we can pick that up. Although we're in Louisiana, and the liquor is considered an essential element of life. It's not like Pennsylvania. Those folks are in bad way right now.
I know, because the state liquor store is shut down, right?
Yeah. So, but yeah, we do Tito's, and Ralph was having a drink the other day, and he was going to have something and vodka, and he said, "Oh boy," he said, "I'll save this for you." So which was very sweet.
I saw this meme yesterday. It said, "My doctor," or no, I'm a lot happier in the morning after I stop drinking coffee. I'm just drinking orange juice, and my doctor thinks it's because of the vitamin C, and I think it's because of the vodka.
Right. Nice. Oh God. When we were in Tallahassee a couple years ago, was down there, we were walking through like a farmer's market, and they had, vendors with crafts. And there was a person who was a potter, and there's a coffee mug that said, "This glazed beautifully," and then it had, "There's probably vodka in this," and I bought it for myself. Yep.
That's great.
Yeah. Anyway, my friend, I'm going to go because you've got a meeting coming up, and so do I.
Yep.
But I want to congratulate you. I wish I was there to hug you. I do have a gift for you, and I was talking about it with Ralph this morning. We're not quite sure how we're going to get it to you. I might just pack it up and just put it in a post office box if I can do that. So
whatever you need to do, I appreciate that.
So I think you'll enjoy it.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, words cannot thank you enough. From meeting in 2015 until now, I began to see the forest through the trees and all that, but the light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, I'm actually in shock right now, just kind of like, whew, all right.
It's a process. Yep, I know, and I know it was not easy at times, and I know I kind of brought the hammer down at times, but that's what I do.
It's your job.
Yeah. Well, and I don't do that for people who I know can't do it.
Right.
So,
right. I get it.
You did good. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. So at this point, regardless of graduation, how does this work? Like, how do I get a diploma or?
You mean what's going to happen from the university?
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do. We were just talking about that. I guess we're talking about it. Yeah, after everybody left the call and before we started deliberating, we were talking about what we were going to do, and nobody knows right now. No one knows. My guess is, although I don't know this, my guess is that they would send diplomas out in whatever way they're going to send them, and then have a ceremony whenever we can. That's just a guess. I have no idea. We may find out more today that what this meeting that we're having today, the dean's going to be on the meeting, so there might be more discussion about that, but I'll let you know if I find anything out. Okay.
In terms of, and this doesn't really affect me now, but I need to let my university know about, the status change and things like that. So I just need to wait to hear when the degree would be conferred, right?
Yeah. So what I would do, it has to be, it will be indicated on your transcripts. So once grades are all in,
Okay.
then it becomes official because it becomes transcripted.
Okay.
I mean, it's official now from our standpoint, but it becomes university official once grades are in. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds good. All right. Well, I'm gonna go make a couple phone calls here. And,
enjoy, bask in it, relax, enjoy. Now, one more thing. You need to get this published now.
Okay.
Right. So the next step, you don't put it away. The next step is you go back to it and start cutting it down into digestible format for consumption. My suggestion would be, I mean, I know you could target the JRME. I would target the Journal of Band Research if I were you, because that's where
really,
that's where you get the most reads. It's ABA publication. I think that's where I would put it if I were you.
I didn't even think, because that was one of the answers I prepared. I was going to say JRME, MEJ, Research and Music Ed, or Instrumentalist.
Yeah, no, don't waste on the instrumentalist. No, so here's what I would do. I would put it out for JBR as your study, right? Then I would take ideas from it and create a clinic-y kind of thing for the instrumentalist, right? So they're going to be two very different articles,
Okay.
Don't cite data in the instrumentalist. They don't want that. You know that.
Right.
But you can talk about literature selection and issues of difficulty versus issues of quality and all that stuff. But make it sound like a clinic, right? Because that's what they like. So those are from my perspective, that's where you would get the most readership. Would be those two journals. You can.
So you're saying Journal of Band Research, and what was the other one?
Instrumentalist.
Oh, and do the instrument. Okay, I thought you said don't do the instrumentalist. Okay, gotcha.
I wouldn't waste the data, the research on the instrumentals. They don't care. But
like a clinic.
But what I would do would be to try to get the data published first through JBR,
right,
and then work on a more clinic-y kind of article for instrumentalists. And I can give you, if you want to send stuff my way, I can take a look and give you some feedback on those things. Plus, the JBR is not nearly as far behind in publication as JRME is.
Okay.
I've had an article in JRME for the past 4 months. Haven't heard a word yet, not a word. And once I hear, then I have to review it. I have to revise it based on what I'm going to get back from them. And then it's going to be another 2 months, and then it's going to sit and wait because there's a backlog.
Right.
So you don't want to wait that long. JBR, I'm on the board of editors, so I know that it's generally 8 months from submission to publication if it gets accepted.
Okay.
All right. So, and do some reading in the journal so you kind of know format and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's my best shot for you.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that works.
Yep.
I got my poster ready, so if I have to do that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so the idea though is you're done, but you're not done.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I'll get on the revisions this week. That's my goal.
All right, very good. All right, my friend, congratulations,
Thank you.
and talk to you again soon, all right?
All right. Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, see ya. Bye.
Bye.